My billionaire husband stood up in that courtroom and called me sterile, said I'd wasted 5 years of his life. The whole room went silent. But when Judge Morrison opened that sealed envelope, honey, let me tell you, his face went white. And mine? I smiled for the first time in months. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story has more twists than a roller coaster. And trust me, you don't want to miss how karma served this man a cold plate of justice. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Diane Thompson, and 6 years ago I thought I was living in a fairy tale. I was 31, running my own marketing consultancy, and doing pretty well for myself. But then I met Trevor Montgomery at a charity gala in Atlanta. This man walked into that ballroom like he owned it, and honestly, with an $800 million tech empire to his name, he practically did. He had this presence, the kind that made everyone turn and look. But what got me wasn't the money or the power. It was the way he looked at me when we started talking, like I was the only person in that entire room. We talked for 3 hours straight that night, about everything, our dreams, our families, our struggles coming up in a world that didn't always make space for us. He told me about building his company from nothing, working 3 jobs to get through college. I told him about losing my father young and how it made me fierce about building my own security. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. That should have been my first clue that I was already falling. 6 months later, we were in Paris. Trevor got down on one knee in front of the Eiffel Tower with a ring that could probably fund a small country. I said yes before he even finished asking. My mother cried happy tears for the first time since my father passed. My best friend Ronnie told me I deserved every bit of this happiness. And I believed it. God, I really believed it. The wedding was everything you'd imagine. 300 guests, a dress that cost more than my first car, and a reception that made it into all the society pages. Trevor's mother, Dorothy, gave a speech about how lucky her son was to find a woman of substance. I remember holding Trevor's hand under the table and thinking, this is it. This is the life I've been working toward. We honeymooned in Bali for 3 weeks, and when we came back, we moved into this beautiful house with 6 bedrooms. 6 bedrooms for the family we were going to build together. That first year, everything felt possible. We'd lay in bed on Sunday mornings talking about baby names. Trevor wanted a boy he could name after his grandfather. I wanted a little girl I could dress up and teach to be strong. We picked out which room would be the nursery. We even painted it yellow because we wanted it to be a surprise. When nothing happened after 6 months, we laughed it off. These things take time, right? That's what everyone says. But then 6 months turned into a year, and laughter turned into concern. I started tracking my cycles, taking vitamins, doing everything the internet told me to do. Trevor would come home from work and ask if today was a good day, and I'd check my app and nod, and we'd try again. It started feeling less like love and more like a job, but I told myself it would be worth it when we finally saw those 2 pink lines. Year 2, we went to the doctors. I remember sitting in that cold office while they ran test after test, blood work, ultrasounds, procedures that made me feel less like a person and more like a science experiment. But every single test came back the same way. I was fine, perfectly healthy, ovulating normally, everything working exactly as it should. The doctor suggested Trevor get tested too, just to rule everything out. He nodded in that office, but when we got to the car, he got angry. Said he didn't need some doctor questioning his manhood. Said we just needed to keep trying, be patient, have faith. I didn't push it. I should have, but I didn't. I was still trying to be the supportive wife, the woman who stands by her man and doesn't make waves. Looking back now, I want to shake that version of myself and tell her to wake up. Year 3 is when Trevor changed. It was gradual at first, like watching a sunset in reverse. The warmth just slowly drained away. He started working later and later, business trips that used to be 2 days stretched into a week. When he was home, he was distant, distracted. His phone was always face down on the table, and he'd take calls in the other room. At family dinners, his mother started making comments, little jabs disguised as concern. Still no grandchildren? Well, I suppose these things happen to some women. Trevor never defended me. He'd just stare at his plate and stay quiet. I started to feel like a failure, like my whole purpose had been reduced to this one thing I couldn't seem to do. I threw myself into work, landed 3 major clients, doubled my revenue. But none of it mattered because I couldn't give my husband a child. That's what the silence in our house told me every single day. Year 4, I hired a private investigator. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. A woman knows when something isn't right. Her name was Candace Williams, 27 years old, worked in Trevor's marketing department. The investigator sent me photos of them at hotels, restaurants, her apartment. In one photo, Trevor had his hand on her stomach, and she was smiling up at him like he'd hung the moon. That's when I knew it wasn't just an affair. She was pregnant. I confronted him on a Tuesday night. He didn't even try to lie, just looked at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before and said, "She can give me what you can't." 5 years of marriage, and that's what it came down to. I asked him how far along she was, and he said 4 months. 4 months of him coming home to me, kissing me goodnight, pretending we were still working on our family together. 4 months of lies stacked on top of 3 years of distance. He filed for divorce that Friday, had his lawyers draw up papers citing irreconcilable differences. There was a prenup, of course. I'd signed it in the haze of engagement bliss, never thinking I'd actually need to worry about it. It stated that if the marriage ended, I'd get a small settlement and walk away clean. His attorneys were already preparing their strategy. Paint me as the gold digger who trapped him, couldn't give him children, and now wanted to take him for everything. They were good at their job. Within a week, stories started appearing on social media, anonymous sources claiming I'd been obsessed with his money from day one. Friends we'd had over for dinner parties suddenly couldn't remember my name. But I had Mrs. Barbara Lawson on my side. She was 63 years old, had been practicing family law for 35 years, and didn't lose cases. When I walked into her office broken and defeated, she looked me in the eye and said, "Honey, wipe those tears. We're about to go to war, and I don't plan on losing." She told me to document everything. Every text message, every credit card statement, every single piece of evidence I could find. And then she told me to search his office at home while he was on his next business trip. I felt like a criminal going through Trevor's things, but I'm so glad I did. In his safe, the one he thought I didn't know the combination to, I found medical records. Test results from Princeton Fertility Clinic dated 3 years ago. 3 years. The report was clear. Severe oligospermia. That means extremely low sperm count. The doctor's notes said natural conception would be nearly impossible without intervention. Trevor had known for 3 years that he was the reason we couldn't have a baby. 3 years of letting me think it was my fault. 3 years of watching me cry, blame myself, feel broken. 3 years of lying to my face. I took photos of everything and sent them to Mrs. Lawson. She called me an hour later and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Oh, we've got him now." The court date came faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before, kept rehearsing in my mind how it would go, what he would say, what I would feel, but nothing could have prepared me for walking into that courtroom and seeing him sitting there with his attorney, Gerald Banks, looking so confident, so sure he was going to win. His whole family was there. His mother sat right behind him wearing pearls and judgment. Candace wasn't there, though. Interesting. Judge Morrison walked in, and everyone stood. She was a black woman in her 50s with silver hair and an expression that said she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. I'd heard she was fair but tough. I was counting on the tough part. Trevor's attorney went first. Painted this picture of his client as a devoted husband who'd tried everything to make the marriage work. A successful businessman who'd provided a wonderful life for his wife. A man who desperately wanted children but married a woman who, unfortunately, couldn't give them to him. Then Trevor took the stand. He sat there in his expensive suit, speaking in that smooth voice that used to make me melt, and told his version of events. He talked about how much he'd wanted a family, how he'd been patient and supportive, how he'd encouraged me to see the best doctors. And then he said it. Looking right at Judge Morrison, he said, "Your Honor, I married a woman who turned out to be sterile. 5 years of my life wasted on someone who couldn't fulfill the basic purpose of marriage. The courtroom went dead silent. I felt every eye turn to look at me. Trevor's mother was nodding like he'd just said something profound. His attorney was shuffling papers with a satisfied look, and I just sat there, gripping the edge of the table, feeling like I'd been slapped. Mrs. Lawson reached over and squeezed my hand. She leaned close and whispered, "Hold on, baby." We're about to flip this whole thing. When it was our turn, Mrs. Lawson stood up slowly. She buttoned her jacket and walked toward the judge with this calm confidence that made the whole room shift. "Your Honor," she said, "everything you just heard was a lie. And I have proof." She held up a manila envelope, sealed and official-looking. "These are medical records from Princeton Fertility Clinic. I'd like to submit them as evidence." Trevor's face changed. Just for a second, I saw panic flash across it before he covered it with confusion. His attorney objected, but Judge Morrison overruled him. She took the envelope, opened it carefully, and started reading. I watched her face change. Her eyebrows went up. Her jaw tightened. She looked from the papers to Trevor and back again. Then she looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that felt like vindication. "Mr. Montgomery," Judge Morrison said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "according to these medical records dated 3 years ago, you were diagnosed with severe oligospermia. The notes indicate you were told natural conception would be nearly impossible. Were you aware of this diagnosis?" The courtroom exploded. People were whispering, gasping, turning to their neighbors. Trevor's attorney jumped up demanding to know where we got those records. Trevor's mother had her hand over her mouth. And Trevor? Trevor just sat there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. That's private medical information," he finally stammered. "She had no right—" "Answer the question, Mr. Montgomery," Judge Morrison cut him off. "Were you aware of this diagnosis?" "Yes, but—" "And did you share this information with your wife?" Silence. "Mr. Montgomery?" "No, Your Honor." Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair and looked at him with pure disgust. "So let me understand this correctly. You knew for 3 years that you were the reason your marriage wasn't producing children. You let your wife undergo numerous medical tests and procedures. You let her believe she was the problem. You let your family blame her, and then you stood in my courtroom and called her sterile? Your Honor, it's not that simple." "It seems very simple to me, Mr. Montgomery." She looked down at the papers again. "And there's more here. Mrs. Lawson, would you like to elaborate?" Mrs. Lawson stood back up, and I swear she looked like an angel of justice. "Your Honor, if you look at the dates, Ms. Williams became pregnant approximately 4 months ago. Given Mr. Montgomery's diagnosis and the timeline of his affair, we have reason to believe that child isn't biologically his. We've subpoenaed Ms. Williams to testify, but she's been conveniently unreachable." The gasps got louder. Trevor's attorney was on his feet arguing about relevance, but Judge Morrison silenced him with one look. She turned to Trevor, and her voice was ice cold. "Mr. Montgomery, you came into my courtroom and committed fraud. You attempted to manipulate these proceedings with lies. You emotionally abused your wife for years, and you did it all while cheating on her and hiding medical information that was crucial to your marriage." She closed the folder and looked at both attorneys. "Here's how this is going to go. The prenuptial agreement is invalidated due to fraud and misrepresentation. Mrs. Thompson will receive 60% of all marital assets. Mr. Montgomery will pay alimony for 5 years at an amount commensurate with the lifestyle he provided during the marriage, and he will be responsible for all of Mrs. Thompson's legal fees. Furthermore, I'm recommending that Mrs. Thompson pursue a civil suit for emotional distress. This court is adjourned." She banged her gavel, and it was over, just like that. 5 years of lies, destroyed in 5 minutes of truth. Trevor tried to talk to me as we left the courtroom, tried to explain, to apologize, to somehow make sense of what he'd done. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't know this man at all. Maybe I never had. I walked past him without saying a word. There was nothing left to say. The aftermath was messy but satisfying. Trevor's business partners started distancing themselves. No one wants to work with a man who lies about something so fundamental. Candace sued him for fraud when it came out that the baby wasn't his. She'd been sleeping with someone else, too. His whole perfect image crumbled. Meanwhile, I took my settlement and expanded my marketing firm, hired 10 new employees, landed contracts with some of the biggest companies in the country, built something real on a foundation that couldn't be shaken because it was mine. You know what I learned through all of this? The truth always comes to light. Trevor tried to make me feel broken, worthless, less than, but all along he was the one living a lie. That envelope didn't just contain medical records, it contained my vindication, my freedom, my future. It proved that I was never the problem. I was never broken. I was just married to a coward who couldn't face his own truth, so he tried to bury me in his lies instead. To every woman out there being made to feel like you're not enough, document everything, trust your gut, and never let anyone dim your light. Your worth isn't tied to someone else's lies. You are not defined by what someone else says you lack. You are whole, complete, and powerful exactly as you are. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything? I read every single one. And remember, the next video drops in 3 days, and trust me, that story is just as wild. Until then, stay strong, stay smart, and never settle for less than you deserve. I'm Diane, and this was my truth.
Previously, Sarah shocked everyone at the billionaire's mansion when she stole the spotlight at the grand party. But what came after was even more dramatic. Secrets, forbidden love, and dangerous confrontations were about to change her life forever. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional billionaire stories like this one. If you have ever been in a place or situation where people look down on you, but you surprised them all, then this story will resonate with you. Now let's dive in. After the lavish party, life inside Chief Duru's mansion appeared to return to normal, but Sarah's world had already shifted. The image of Steve, the handsome bachelor who had looked at her as though she were the only one in the crowd, lingered in her mind. She had thought that would be the end of it, a fleeting encounter, but 2 days later, the unexpected happened. A sleek black car drove through the tall iron gates of the mansion, and it was Steve stepping out, his tailored suit catching the sunlight. Madame Stella almost screamed in delight when she was told who was waiting in the living room. She quickly called her daughters, Andrea and Adele, upstairs. Girls, do you know who is here? Steve Jacobs himself. Hurry up, go and change. Wear something nice and look sharp, don't embarrass me, she urged them, clapping her hands like a drill sergeant. The girls rushed upstairs, and within minutes came down dressed in short silk gowns with expensive jewelry their father had brought from Dubai. Stella sprayed them with perfume, adjusted their hair, and positioned them like flowers in the sitting room before moving majestically to welcome Steve. My dear, you are welcome. What an honor to have you here, she gushed, asking him what he would like to take and trying to engage him in conversation. Chief Duru was out of the country on business, so Stella was queen of the house. She spoke about her daughter's brilliance, their time abroad, and their beauty, but Steve only nodded politely. His eyes kept drifting away, searching, and when Sarah walked in quietly with a tray to serve drinks, his face brightened slightly, though he quickly masked it. He smiled at her as she placed the tray on the table, and their eyes met briefly, a silent recognition that Stella missed but her daughters did not. Adele whispered to Andrea, "Why is he looking at that maid?" Andrea hissed, "Shut up, behave yourself, this is our chance." When Steve was leaving, Madame Stella made sure her girls saw him off to his car. She invited him over again and again, convinced he was falling for one of her daughters. Each time he came, she went overboard, sometimes even cooking herself, setting the dining table with imported cutlery, instructing Sarah to serve like a proper maid. Sarah would move quietly, laying plates, pouring drinks, but Steve always found a way to smile at her, a kind smile that warmed her heart and made her feel noticed for the first time in years. Sarah tried to avoid his eyes, terrified that Madame Stella would notice, but deep inside, a forbidden hope was building. One evening, after his third visit, Sarah found a small piece of paper tucked under one of the plates when she cleared the table. She almost dropped the plate in shock, but held it together. Later, in the kitchen, she unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was his number with a simple line written beneath. "Call me." Her heart raced, fear and excitement mixing dangerously. That night she couldn't sleep, staring at the paper under her pillow until finally, after everyone slept, she sneaked to the corner of the servants' quarters and dialed his number with her small Nokia phone. "Hello," his voice came warm, steady, and familiar. "Sarah?" She froze, unable to speak. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "I just want to talk to you, just you." That was the beginning. They started talking in hushed whispers at night, Sarah always afraid someone would overhear. Steve was patient, never pressuring, only asking about her life, her family, her dreams. She told him things she had never told anyone. How she wanted to go to university but couldn't, how she worked like a slave but endured it for her siblings' sake. Sometimes she cried quietly while speaking, and he would listen until she calmed down. Soon Steve started visiting secretly. He would park not too far from the mansion and send her a message. Sarah would sneak out with her scarf tied and meet him at the gate or just down the road, her heart pounding every time. Their meetings were short, just minutes stolen from her harsh world, but they meant everything. He would buy her shawarma, suya, and chocolate, and they would sit in his car. She would eat and laugh like a normal girl, not a maid trapped in a billionaire's house. "You deserve so much more than this, Sarah," he said one night, holding her hand gently. "I don't want to keep watching you suffer in there. I want to take you out, give you a life where you're free." But inside the mansion, the cruelty did not stop. Madame Stella became harsher as the days went by, scolding Sarah for the smallest mistakes. "Lazy girl, what do you even do here? You can't even dust a table properly," she snapped one morning, running her finger across a spotless glass and shaking her head. Despite spending years in London, the Duru daughters did not change. They would deliberately dirty the kitchen after Sarah had cleaned it, eat tiny portions of food on different plates until the sink filled up with dirty plates. The grandmother complained endlessly, lying that Sarah ignored her when she called, even saying she had seen her watching television instead of working, though Sarah had not touched the remote in years. Sarah endured it all silently, drawing strength only from her secret calls with Steve. One afternoon, while Sarah was serving at the dining table, Stella noticed Steve smiling kindly at her, and her instincts flared. Though she said nothing, her suspicion began to grow. She decided to test her theory by deliberately sending Sarah to serve Steve tea in the living room alone. When Sarah entered with the tray, Steve stood to help her, brushing her hand slightly as he took the cup, their eyes locking again. Madame Stella walked in at that moment, and though she didn't catch anything physical, the look on Steve's face confirmed her fears. From that day, Stella began watching Sarah closely, giving her harsher punishments, determined to crush her spirit. But each time Steve heard about it, he became more determined to get her out. He knew he had little time before things got out of hand. He started making plans quietly, speaking to a trusted lawyer and friend. His visits to the mansion continued, sometimes in secret, other times in the pretense of seeing Andrea and Adele while slipping meaningful glances toward Sarah. Madame Stella grew more desperate, pushing her daughters toward him, arranging small private dinners, hoping that he would pick one of her daughters, but his heart was already taken. One night after a secret meeting, Steve whispered to Sarah as he dropped her off near the mansion gate, "Hold on, Sarah. I'm going to get you out of here. Soon, very soon, I promise you." And so, a dangerous game began. Stella trying to tighten her grip on her daughter's future, Sarah sneaking out for moments of freedom, and Steve weaving a plan that would change everything. The secret meetings continued, and though Sarah tried her best to stay unnoticed, the air in the mansion was changing. Madame Stella's eyes were sharp, and her instincts sharper. She had lived long enough to know when a man's attention was drifting, and no matter how she tried to convince herself, she could not deny it. Steve was coming to her house for another reason. One Saturday afternoon, Steve arrived unannounced. Stella, delighted as always, ran to the door herself, calling her daughters, Andrea, Adele. "Steve is here. Hurry up, go and wear something nice and come downstairs now." She welcomed him warmly, offering wine and talking endlessly about the family's status. But Steve was distracted. He asked casually, "Where is Sarah? I didn't see her when I came in." Stella froze. For a second, her smile faltered before she recovered, forcing a laugh. "Ah, you mean the maid? Don't worry about her, she's busy somewhere. Let's talk about my daughters." She waved it off quickly, but in her heart, she knew the truth was staring her in the face. That evening, after Steve left, she stormed into the kitchen, where Sarah was washing the dishes. So, this is what you've been doing, eh? You want to snatch a man meant for my daughters? You think I don't see the way he looks at you? You worthless girl from the village. Is this how you repay me for keeping you in this house? She slapped Sarah so hard that the girl fell to the ground, her cheek burning. Tears stung her eyes, but she said nothing, afraid that answering back would only make it worse. Stella spat on the floor beside her. If I ever catch you looking at him again, you will regret the day you were born. But it was too late. Steve and Sarah were too deep. A week later, Steve called Sarah in the middle of the night. His voice was urgent. Sarah, listen to me. Your madam suspects us. I can feel it. I don't want you to stay there one more month. I've spoken to a lawyer and a house agent. Everything will be ready soon. I want to get you out of there as soon as possible. Will you trust me? Sarah's heart raced. Steve, if Madam Stella finds out, she will kill me, she whispered, terrified. He replied, She won't touch you again, I promise. Just give me a little more time, I'll come for you. But fate moved faster than Steve's plans. One evening, Sarah sneaked out to meet him at the gate. They only stood there for a few minutes, talking softly under the streetlight. Steve reached for her hand, smiling. Soon, Sarah. Soon this will all be behind you. Neither of them noticed that Andrea had been watching from the upstairs balcony. The next morning, all hell broke loose. Stella dragged Sarah into the sitting room by her arm, her daughters standing behind her with folded arms, their faces filled with triumph. So it's true, Stella screamed, her eyes wild. You shameless thing. You've been sneaking out at night to meet Steve? A man of class and pedigree. And you think he will throw away my daughters for a village girl like you? Over my dead body. She slapped her again twice until Sarah's lip bled. Sarah cried out, Madam, please, I didn't mean. But Stella cut her off. Shut up. You planned this. You used your village charm on him. She took Sarah's small phone and locked her in the storeroom that night, without food, muttering that she would deal with her in a way she would never forget. But Steve came the next morning, when he could not reach Sarah throughout the night. He stormed into the mansion unannounced, his face grim. Stella, surprised, tried to gather herself. Ah, Steve, my son, what a pleasant surprise, the girls are upstairs. But Steve raised his hand, his tone cold. Madam Stella, please don't insult me. I am not here for your daughters. I am here for Sarah. The silence that followed was thunderous. Stella's smile vanished. What did you just say? She stammered. Steve's voice grew firmer, his eyes blazing. I said I love Sarah. She is the one I want, the one I came here for all along. I know the way you've treated her. I know what she has suffered in this house, but it ends today. She is coming with me. You lie, Stella screamed, her chest heaving. You lie. How can you choose a maid over my daughters? Do you know who they are? Do you know who we are? This is an insult. A disgrace. No, you cannot do that. By now, Sarah had been brought out, her face swollen from the night before. She stood trembling, tears running down her cheeks. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Steve walked over to her, gently wiping her tears with his handkerchief. Sarah, come with me, he said softly. You don't belong here anymore. Stella rushed forward, blocking the door, screaming, Over my dead body. You will never take her from this house. Never. At that moment, the front door opened and Chief Duru himself walked in, returning unexpectedly from his trip. He stopped, shocked at the scene before him, his wife shouting, Sarah crying, Steve standing protectively by her side. What is going on here? He demanded, his deep voice filling the room. Stella pointed at Sarah like a madwoman. Ask her. Ask this witch what she has done. She wants to destroy our family. She has bewitched Steve. But Steve cut her off. Chief Duru, with all due respect, your wife has been cruel to Sarah for years. I've seen enough. I love her, and I will not stand by and watch her being treated like this anymore. I want to take her away and marry her, with or without your blessing. The room fell silent. Chief Duru stared at Steve, then at Sarah, then at his wife whose face was twisted with fury. Finally, he sighed heavily, shaking his head. Stella, enough is enough. You've gone too far. Sarah has been in this house since she was a child. If this young man wants her, let him take her. At least she will finally have peace. Stella let out a wail, collapsing onto the sofa, clutching her chest. No, no, not after all I have done for this family, not after sending my daughters abroad. This cannot happen. But it was too late. Steve held Sarah's hand firmly, leading her out of the mansion while she looked back one last time at the house that had been her prison. As the gates closed behind them, Sarah felt the heavy chains of her past fall away. For the first time in her life, she breathed freely. Steve looked at her and said, "You're safe now, Sarah. You're safe." And though her heart still trembled with fear, a spark of hope burned bright within her. And so, Sarah finally walked out of the mansion that had been her cage for years. But was this truly the end of her struggles, or only the beginning of a new battle? Tell me, if you were in Sarah's shoes, would you have stayed and fought, or walked away too? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because part 3 is coming, and the storm has only just begun.
The ballroom glowed with golden chandeliers as Lagos's elite gathered for the charity gala of the year. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and laughter echoed. At the center of it all stood Nnamdi Okoro, a tall, broad-shouldered black African man, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo with a silk bow tie. His dark skin gleamed under the lights, his posture radiating power. Beside him stood his wife, Amara Okoro, stunning in a crimson off-shoulder gown that flowed to the marble floor. Her natural curls framed her face, and a diamond necklace sparkled at her collarbone. They looked flawless, Africa's golden couple, admired by all. Mr. and Mrs. Okoro. A photographer called. The crowd cheered as Nnamdi leaned toward Amara, kissing her cheek for the cameras. But in that split second, Amara's smile faltered. As soon as the flash went off, she turned away, her manicured hand covering her face. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some thought it was shyness. Others whispered it was coldness. But Nnamdi knew the truth. This was no accident. She always did this. His chest tightened. Behind his charming smile, pain stabbed at his heart. Later that night, inside their glass-walled mansion overlooking the lagoon, silence pressed down like a storm. Nnamdi loosened his bow tie, his tuxedo jacket tossed across the leather sofa. His expensive watch caught the light as he rubbed his temples. He had been patient for too long, but tonight had pushed him to the edge. Amara walked in, her crimson gown now draped with a silk shawl. She had removed her heels, but her elegance remained intact. Her dark skin glowed against the dim golden lamps, yet her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Nnamdi turned sharply. His deep voice, usually calm and commanding, trembled with raw hurt. "Why, Amara? Why do you hide your face every time I touch you? Do you know how it feels to have the world believe you are ashamed of me, when all I want is your love?" Amara froze. Her shawl slipped slightly, revealing trembling hands clutching its fabric. She looked away. "It's not about you, Nnamdi." "Then what is it?" he demanded. His eyes darkened. "We stand before thousands, smiling like royalty. Yet when I kiss you, you turn into a stranger. Tell me, Amara, what are you hiding from me?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Finally, in a whisper, she said, "Some truths are too heavy to share." 2 years ago, Nnamdi had first seen Amara in a cozy cafe in Victoria Island. She wasn't dressed like a woman from high society. She wore ripped jeans, a simple white shirt, and a black leather jacket. Her afro puff bounced as she laughed with friends, sipping on iced coffee. Nnamdi, a billionaire used to people bowing in his presence, had been stunned. Her confidence, her carefree laughter, it was magnetic. He had walked up to her table, dressed sharply in a gray suit and polished shoes. "I don't mean to interrupt," he had said with a rare smile, "but the room feels dull when you laugh and I'm not a part of it." Her friends had giggled. Amara had raised an eyebrow. "You think charm works on everyone, Mr. Billionaire?" he chuckled. "No, but I'm hoping it works on you." From that moment, their story began, two souls from different worlds colliding. Their wedding had been the talk of the nation. Nnamdi wore a white agbada with a modern slim cut paired with designer loafers. Amara stunned in a custom gown that merged traditional lace patterns with modern elegance. Her veil flowing like a river. Guests wore Ankara outfits stitched in the latest designs, the atmosphere alive with drums and cameras flashing. When they exchanged vows, the world believed they had witnessed a love story for the ages. But even then, on the night of their union, after the first kiss as husband and wife, Amara had turned away. Namdi had noticed but told himself it was nerves. Now, 2 years later, he could no longer ignore the truth. Back in the present, the storm inside Namdi finally broke. He removed his watch, his deep voice rising with pain. I have built empires from dust. I have survived betrayals, lawsuits, and enemies who wanted me ruined. But this silence from you, this wall you build every night, it is killing me in ways nothing else ever has. Amara flinched at his words. Her crimson gown shimmered as she hurried toward the balcony. The cool Lagos breeze brushed against her skin as she gripped the marble railing, tears running freely down her cheeks. Namdi followed, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, his powerful frame casting a shadow beside her. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder, his voice now breaking. Amara, whatever it is, I can bear it, but don't shut me out. Don't turn our marriage into a performance for the world while I die inside. She shook her head, refusing to face him. Her voice trembled. You don't know what I carry. If you did, you wouldn't love me the same. Try me, he whispered. For a moment, silence filled the night. The lagoon sparkled below. The city lights glittered in the distance, but on that balcony, the air was heavy with secrets. Amara finally turned slightly, her face half hidden in the shadows. Her lips trembled as she whispered, Some scars are better left unseen. That night, the mansion was quiet, but Namdi could not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every moment. Amara's laughter in the cafe, her radiant walk down the aisle, her perfect smile at public events. But what haunted him most was the way she trembled at his touch, as though love itself was something she feared. For the first time, the billionaire who owned everything, cars, companies, mansions, felt powerless. Because the one thing he wanted most, his wife's unguarded love, seemed farther away than ever. And little did he know, the truth Amara hid would not just test their marriage, it would break him. The morning light poured through the wide glass walls of the Okoro mansion, flooding the polished marble floors with gold. The lagoon outside shimmered, boats moving lazily in the distance, while birds chirped in the palm trees that lined the driveway. Inside, Namdi sat at the head of the long dining table. His navy blue slim-fit suit pressed to perfection, his shirt crisp, a diamond-studded wristwatch catching the sunlight. His face, though handsome and commanding, carried a shadow of pain. Across from him, Amara entered quietly. She was dressed in a cream-colored blouse tucked neatly into tailored beige trousers, her heels clicking softly on the floor. Her natural curls were tied into a high puff, her skin glowing even without makeup, but her eyes revealed the tears she had cried through the night. She poured herself black coffee, her hands trembling slightly. Namdi lowered the tablet he had been scrolling. Every headline praised them as the perfect couple of Lagos society. Photos of them from the gala filled the news, him smiling, her glowing in a crimson gown, but none of the articles spoke of how she had hidden her face after his kiss. His deep voice broke the silence. The world sees perfection, but I see a wall between us. Tell me, Amara, how long will you keep hiding? His words cut through the stillness of the room. Amara gripped the coffee cup tighter, staring into the dark liquid. You wouldn't understand, she whispered. Namdi rose, his tall, broad-shouldered frame casting a shadow over her. His fitted suit made him look every inch the billionaire the world admired, but his voice was raw with vulnerability. I have fought enemies, built empires, faced betrayal, yet nothing hurts more than seeing you turn away from me every time I show love. If there is a truth, let me bear it with you. Her lips trembled. She wanted to tell him, but fear clamped her throat shut. Instead, she shook her head, muttering, You wouldn't look at me the same. That night, When the city lights twinkled outside and the mansion grew quiet, Amara stood before the tall mirror in their sunlit bedroom. She slowly removed her makeup, her fingers trembling as she revealed what she had hidden for years. Faint scars marred the left side of her face, traces of a fire from her childhood. They weren't fresh or gruesome, just healed ridges, but to her, they were chains of shame. Her tears slid down her cheeks as memories flooded back. Flames roaring, the suffocating smoke, her mother pulling her out of the blaze. She had survived, but the scars remained. She thought of every camera flash, every public kiss, every time she had covered her face to hide them. Suddenly, the door opened. Namdi stepped in, his sleeves rolled up from working late in his home office. His gaze lifted, and for the first time, he saw her reflection without the mask. Amara gasped, spinning around, her hands flying to her face. "Don't look at me," she cried, her voice breaking, but Namdi didn't move back. His eyes glistened with tears as he stepped forward slowly. "Amara?" His voice cracked. "Why would you hide this from me? Why carry this alone?" She sobbed. "Because you deserve perfection. The world sees you as untouchable, the man who has everything. How could I let them see your wife like this? How could I let you see me?" Namdi reached out gently, lowering her hands from her face. His palms were warm, steady, holding her trembling wrists. "The world does not live here," he whispered. "The world did not make me laugh in a cafe, or walk down the aisle with me, or hold me when I was broken. That was you. Amara, scars do not make you less. To me, they make you even more real, more beautiful." Her eyes widened in disbelief. She shook her head. "You're only saying that because you love me." He smiled softly through his tears. "Yes, because I love you. And nothing you reveal will ever change that." Then, in the soft glow of the bedroom light, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her scars. Amara froze, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat. For years she had feared this moment, that someone would see, would touch the marks she despised. But when Namdi's lips touched her scars, she didn't feel disgust. She felt freedom. For the first time, she didn't turn away. Her tears fell harder. But this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of release. The next morning, daylight streamed through their curtains. For the first time, Amara didn't rush to cover her face with makeup before leaving the room. She wore a soft linen dress, simple yet elegant, and walked to breakfast with her natural skin visible, scars and all. Namdi looked up at her and smiled proudly, as though she had just won the greatest battle of her life. Days later, they attended another charity luncheon, this time under the blazing Lagos sun. Namdi wore a light gray designer suit with sunglasses. Amara stunned in a flowing golden gown that shimmered in daylight. Cameras swarmed them the moment they arrived. When the crowd called for a kiss, Namdi leaned in. For a heartbeat, Amara's old fear returned, but then she remembered his words, his kiss on her scars, his love unshaken. This time, she let him. She didn't turn away. The cameras flashed, catching her face fully. The faint scars were visible under the sunlight, but so was her radiant smile. Whispers spread in the crowd, but Namdi's proud gaze silenced them. He held her close, his voice low against her ear. "Do you see now? Even daylight can't dim your beauty." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you for choosing me, scars and all." He kissed her forehead. "I will always choose you. In every life, in every season, I will always choose you." That afternoon, as the sun set over Lagos, they stood together on the balcony of the event hall, the city glowing beneath them. For the first time in years, Amara lifted her face to the light without fear, letting the world see her as she was. She was no longer the billionaire's wife who hid her face after every kiss. She was Amara Okoro, the woman who had survived, who had healed, and who was loved beyond measure.
The moment my husband's spit hit my face at his family's dinner table, everything went silent. His mother gasped. His father froze. But what they didn't know? I wasn't just the wife they loved to disrespect. I was the woman who could end their careers with one phone call. Before we dive into this story, if you love tales about karma coming back around and people getting exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Diane Thompson, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd met the man of my dreams. His name was Jerome Walker, and when I first saw him at a community fundraiser in downtown Atlanta, I swear time stopped. He had this smile that could light up a room, you know? The kind of man who opened doors, remembered small details about conversations, and made you feel like you were the only woman in the world. I fell hard. Maybe too hard. Now, here's the thing about me that's important to this story. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Industries, a major manufacturing corporation with subsidiaries across the Southeast. I built that company from the ground up over the last 8 years, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But when I met Jerome, I didn't tell him any of that. I'd learned the hard way that when people know you have money, they treat you differently. They want something from you, or they resent you, or they can't see past the dollar signs to see the actual person underneath. So I kept it simple. When Jerome asked what I did for work, I told him I was a consultant. It wasn't exactly a lie. I do consult, just for my own company. He seemed satisfied with that answer, and honestly, it felt good to just be Diane for once. Not CEO Diane, not the boss. Just me. We dated for 2.5 years before he proposed, and during that time, I met his family. His parents, Gloria and Raymond Walker, were your typical hard-working folks. Gloria worked in human resources at some manufacturing company, and Raymond was a supervisor at a distribution center. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, respectable, and proud of what they'd built. Jerome's sister Vanessa worked as a dental hygienist and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that she made good money. From the very first dinner at their house, I could feel the judgment. They looked at my clothes, my car, my jewelry, and I could see the questions forming in their eyes. How does a consultant afford a BMW? Why does her purse cost more than most people's rent? But I smiled through it, answered their probing questions vaguely, and tried to win them over with kindness. Jerome always defended me in those early days. When his mother made snide comments about me being fancy, or his sister questioned where I grew up, he'd shut it down. He'd tell them I worked hard for what I had, and that they needed to respect his choice. I loved him for that. I thought he had my back. I thought wrong. We got married 6 months ago in a beautiful ceremony that I paid for, but let him take credit for planning. I didn't mind. I wanted him to feel like the man, like he was providing, even though I was funding our entire life. But something shifted after we said, "I do." It was subtle at first. He started making comments about my secrets. He'd say things like, "You sure are private about your job?" Or, "I still don't really understand what you do all day." His family got bolder, too. Gloria started calling me bougie to my face, laughing like it was a joke, but I could hear the edge in her voice. Raymond would make comments about how I acted like I was above my raising, whatever that meant. And Jerome? He stopped defending me. He'd laugh along with them, or worse, he'd stay silent. I should have left then. I should have seen the red flags for what they were. But I wanted to make it work. I'd invested 3 years of my life into this man, into this family, and I kept telling myself that marriage takes work, that things would get better, that I just needed to be patient. I was a fool. 6 months into our marriage, Gloria insisted on hosting an anniversary dinner at her house. I didn't want to go. I had a bad feeling about it from the moment Jerome told me. But he pressured me, said I was being difficult, said his family was trying to make an effort, and I needed to meet them halfway. So I went. I put on a simple dress, nothing too fancy, and drove to their house that Saturday evening with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. When I walked in, I immediately knew something was off. This wasn't just a dinner for Jerome and me. His Aunt Beverly was there, his cousin Travis, and a few other extended family members I'd only met once or twice. The table was set, but there was a weird energy in the air, like everyone was in on a joke except me. Gloria hugged me at the door, but it felt performative, like she was putting on a show. She directed me to sit at the far end of the table, which she called the kids' end, even though I was a grown woman of 29 years old. Jerome sat at the other end with his father and the other adults. I remember looking at him, confused, waiting for him to say something, to tell his mother that his wife should sit next to him. He didn't. He just shrugged and took his seat. Dinner started off tense. Gloria served pot roast and potatoes, and everyone made small talk about work and the weather. Then Travis, who'd just gotten some new position at a logistics company, started bragging about his salary and his benefits package. Everyone congratulated him like he'd just won the lottery. Then Beverly turned to me with this sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Diane, honey, you've been married to Jerome for 6 months now, and we still don't really know what it is you do. What exactly do you consult about? Or is it too complicated for simple folks like us to understand?" The table got quiet. All eyes were on me. I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I gave the same vague answer I always did, that I worked with businesses on operational efficiency and strategic planning. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. Gloria laughed, this sharp, mocking sound, and said, "She probably just answers phones and calls it consulting. You know how these young girls are nowadays, always trying to make themselves sound more important than they are." Everyone laughed, everyone except me. I looked at Jerome, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to tell his mother that she was out of line. He laughed too. Not a big laugh, but enough. Enough for me to know that he wasn't on my side anymore. Maybe he never had been. I excused myself to the bathroom because I needed a moment to breathe, to collect myself, to figure out how I was going to get through the rest of this night. As I walked down the hallway, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Vanessa and Gloria were talking, and they weren't being quiet about it. Vanessa said, "I told Jerome from the beginning that she was hiding something. Nobody dresses that nice on a consultant's salary. She's either in debt up to her eyeballs or she's doing something shady." Gloria responded, "He needs to put his foot down. Check her phone, check her emails, find out what she's really doing. I didn't raise my son to be a fool for some woman with secrets." I stood there in that hallway, frozen, listening to these women plot against me. And the worst part? They were talking about my husband like he was a child who needed protection from his own wife. I walked back to that dining room with my head held high, and I announced that I was leaving. I thanked Gloria for dinner, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. Jerome jumped up from his seat and blocked my path. His face was tight with anger, and he said through clenched teeth, "You're embarrassing me. Just sit down and stop being so sensitive." I tried to walk past him, but he grabbed my wrist. Hard enough to hurt. I looked him in the eyes and said quietly, "Don't you ever put your hands on me." He didn't let go. Instead, he squeezed tighter and repeated, I said, "Sit down." I pulled my arm away with force, and that's when Gloria jumped in. She pointed her finger in my face and yelled, "Don't you talk to my son like that in my house. You're the problem here, not him." Raymond stood up. Vanessa stood up. Beverly and Travis were watching like it was entertainment. Everyone was yelling, talking over each other, and I was standing there in the middle of this chaos, realizing that I'd married into a family that would never respect me. But the worst was yet to come. Jerome got in my face, so close I could feel his breath, and he screamed, "You think you're better than us? You think you're so special? You're nothing!" And then he did it. He spat in my face, right there in front of his entire family. The room went completely silent. I could feel the wetness on my cheek, warm and humiliating. Gloria gasped, but she didn't move. Raymond's mouth fell open, but he didn't say a word. No one did anything. They just stared. I wiped my face slowly with the back of my hand. I looked at each of them, one by one, and I made a decision in that moment. I was done being disrespected. I was done hiding who I was. I was done protecting people who wouldn't protect me. Gloria tried to speak, tried to defend her son by saying, "Jerome, "You shouldn't have done that, but Diane, you did push him." And I held up my hand to stop her. I said, "No, we're done here," and I walked out that door. Jerome followed me to my car, apologizing, begging, saying he just snapped, that he didn't mean it, that we could work it out. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away. I didn't go home. I couldn't face our apartment, our bed, our life together. I checked into a hotel room downtown and sat in the silence for hours, and then I made a decision. Monday morning, I walked into Montgomery Industries headquarters like I did every day. My assistant Denise noticed something was off. She always could read me, but she didn't ask questions. I went into my office, closed the door, and pulled up our company database. Montgomery Industries owns 17 subsidiary companies across Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. We employ over 8,000 people, and as I scrolled through the list of subsidiaries, something caught my eye. Bergen Manufacturing, Sterling Distribution. I clicked on Bergen Manufacturing first and ran an employee search. Gloria Walker, Human Resources Coordinator. I clicked on Sterling Distribution. Raymond Walker, Distribution Supervisor. Jerome's parents both worked for companies that I owned. I'd never made the connection because I use my maiden name professionally, Diane Thompson, not Diane Walker. They had no idea who I was, no idea whose house they were disrespecting, no idea whose face their son had just spit on. I requested their employment files. Gloria had worked at Bergen for 12 years. Raymond had been at Sterling for 15. Both had average performance reviews, nothing spectacular, nothing terrible. Just two people doing their jobs, collecting their paychecks, going home to talk about how much better they were than everyone else. I sat back in my chair and thought about what I wanted to do. I'm not a vindictive person by nature. I didn't build a multi-million-dollar company by being petty or emotional. But sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like dirt and expect no repercussions. I picked up my phone and called the HR director at Bergen Manufacturing. I called the operations manager at Sterling Distribution. I explained that I needed to make some personnel changes for operational efficiency reasons. By noon, both Gloria and Raymond Walker had received termination notices, effective immediately, with severance packages because I'm not cruel, but they were done. Jerome had been calling me non-stop since Saturday night. Texts, voicemails, messages through friends. I finally answered on Monday afternoon. He wanted to meet, to talk, to apologize properly. I agreed to meet him at a cafe near his parents' workplace. Neutral ground, public place, safe. He showed up looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled. He sat down across from me and immediately started apologizing. He said his family was wrong, that he was wrong, that he loved me and wanted to fix this. I listened quietly, sipping my coffee, letting him talk himself out. When he finally stopped, I asked him, "Jerome, did you ever wonder why I never talked about my job?" He looked confused. I continued, "Because I knew. I knew your family would treat me differently if they knew the truth." "What truth?" he asked. I leaned forward and said, "I'm not a consultant, Jerome. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Industries." I watched his face go pale. "The same Montgomery Industries that owns Bergen Manufacturing, where your mother works, and Sterling Distribution, where your father works." His hands started shaking. He shook his head like he could make my words untrue. "I made some calls this morning. Your parents both received termination notices about an hour ago." Jerome stood up so fast his chair fell backward. People in the cafe turned to look. He was shaking, his voice rising as he said, "You can't do that? That's abuse of power, that's illegal." I stayed calm. I looked him in the eye and said, "No. What's abuse is spitting on your wife at a family dinner while everyone watches and says nothing. What your family did to me for 3 years is abuse. This is just business." He tried to argue, tried to threaten legal action, tried to make me feel guilty. But I was done feeling guilty for being successful. I was done apologizing for having standards. I was done making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. I stood up, left money for my coffee on the table, and walked out of that cafe. I never looked back. The fallout was immediate. Jerome's family tried to reach me, calls, messages, showing up at my office building until security escorted them away. They claimed I was heartless, that I'd ruined their lives over a mistake. But spitting on someone isn't a mistake. It's a choice. Jerome tried to fight the terminations, hired a lawyer who took one look at the employment contracts and told him there was nothing to be done. He filed for divorce, thinking he could get alimony or a settlement. My prenup, which he'd signed without reading because he never thought I had anything worth protecting, ensured he got nothing. His family turned on him after they found out the truth. They blamed him for losing such a valuable connection, for not managing his wife better, for letting me slip through his fingers. The same people who'd treated me like trash were now angry that they couldn't use me. I moved forward with my life. I threw myself into work, started therapy to process everything I'd been through, and began rebuilding my sense of self. 6 months later, I'm stronger than I've ever been. I learned that hiding who you are to make others comfortable only breeds contempt. I learned that respect isn't optional in any relationship, especially marriage. And I learned that some people will never see your value until it costs them everything. Sometimes people don't realize your worth until it costs them everything. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in this situation. Would you have shown mercy, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Subscribe for more real-life stories where karma doesn't play. And remember, never let anyone make you feel small, especially not the person who promised to love you. I'll see you in the next one.